Before I forget, for our satellite campuses, if I could get you guys to make sure your mics are off during the presentation. We had a little feedback problem in the last presentation last week, but if you could turn those off, I'd surely appreciate it. So all the students, welcome. All our invited guests, faculty, thank you very much for coming. A couple of brief announcements. I'm going to turn the time over to Natalie for a minute, and she's got an announcement about e-week activities.
All right, well, it's good to see all of you. Hopefully everybody here has their passport for e-week. Tonight's event, you do get a sticker for, so if you haven't gotten a sticker already, make sure that when you leave, on either doors, there's going to be someone that's handing out those stickers. And what the sticker does is enter you into the raffle, which is on Friday, so that's another event you'll want to look for. So that's all I've got. Thanks.
Thank you. One other quick announcement, as we mentioned last week, because of some of the recording issues we've had, at least getting the recordings, the video recordings posted online, all the deadlines, if you're in the class for your papers, are we've got till the end of the semester. I think it's April 27th is when the cutoff is. So rather than a week after they're due, they're all open till the end of the semester. If you have previously sent those directly to me, please go back and put them in the Blackboard Dropbox. That would be great. Okay, very excited about today's speaker. I got to hear him about 5 years ago. I was talking to Dean Anderson before him. But I'm going to allow our good Dean, Doug Anderson, to do the introduction. Actually, I don't know if I'd have a choice in that, so now's probably not the right word. But Doug's going to give Dean Anderson's going to give the introduction to our speaker, and I'm going to turn the time over to him.
Thank you very much. Well, it really is my privilege and pleasure. So thank you, Professor Herman, for that privilege to introduce my good friend, Bill Child. And Bill is joined here with us this evening by his wife, Pat, and we're grateful, Pat, that you would come on up with us. And I think maybe with one or two of your former missionaries, is that possible tonight as well? In the D.C. mission with you as well. Well, you probably all have mothers who've said to you at some time in your life, be careful who your friends are. Be sure to choose wisely who your friends are. Make sure you choose friends who can help you rise to a higher level of behavior and performance and who can inspire you. I want you to know that if my mother were here tonight, she would say that I've chosen wisely in my friend Bill Child. Bill and I and Pat first got to know each other when they moved into the neighborhood that I was living in Salt Lake City back about 15 years ago. And so I knew them first as neighbors. And they were great neighbors. What you will see in Bill Child tonight is what everybody sees in Bill Child, no matter who they are, no matter what their station in life is, because he's the same kind, generous, honest, courteous gentleman with everybody that he meets. This book that you have received this evening is one of the best business case studies I know on how to succeed in business. And as soon as I became dean, I knew that I wanted to start a Dean's Convocation series in which I would be able to invite some of my friends and associates and acquaintances who I've been inspired by to meet with our students and to have them be exposed, you to be exposed to these great individuals, these great men and women. One of the very first that I reached out to and invited to come was Bill Child. And at that time, this book was only an idea in his mind, how to build a business Warren Buffett would buy. And we put that sign up and invited people to come if they were interested, and just like tonight, the place was full. And then Bill and Pat went off to serve a mission for the LDS Church as the directors of the Washington, D.C. Visitor Center at the Washington, D.C. Temple. And Bill continued to think about this book and teamed up with Jeff Benedict to actually get it out in writing. And then we invited Bill and Jeff to come back a second time to talk about it. And we're so privileged to have him back again. One of the wonderful things about being at a university is that you all make us constantly new and constantly fresh because you're renewing yourselves every year. We get new students all the time, and the opportunity to share this story is one that we really, really appreciate having. You know, you're going to hear tonight about how Bill built this business, and you're going to learn a little bit about his relationship with Warren Buffett, which is an extraordinary story. And I hope, Bill, you'll tell the story about Idaho and Boise and the new store up there and what that led to. I'm inspired every time I think about it. And every time I have an opportunity to talk about Bill Child with professional audiences that I see and speak to, I do. I use the occasion to tell them this extraordinary story. Our director of entrepreneurial programs, Dr. Michael Glauser, has said that entrepreneurship is really the new leadership model. And when you think about what the elements of that leadership model are, every single one of them match up in the personal characteristics of Bill Child. There is no one who I can think of who is a better exemplar of the kind of leadership that we're trying to establish and foster here at Utah State University than my friend Bill Child, and I hope you'll welcome him tonight to the Utah State University.
Thank you, Dr. Patricia. Thank you. Boy, do I have to speak now? My word! After that wonderful introduction, you know, if Warren were here, I think they wanted Warren, and he would usually say, "I'm just going to test this mic. Testing, 1 million, 2 million, 3 million." Then later on, he would say, "Testing, 1 billion, 2 billion, 3 billion. Can you hear me okay in the back?" So is it working? I guess it is, isn't it? Well, I am honored to be here. I've had a wonderful ride. I don't deserve all the accolades, but I do have a lot of respect for Dean Anderson, Doug Anderson, great neighbor, great visionary. And Mike Glauser and I we've become acquainted and did some things at Westminster College. And I have a lot of respect for Mike. So you're in good hands. You have some wonderful leaders, visionary, great characters, individuals, good models, good role models. 60 years ago, I was a student, like some of you, but a lot of you are really a lot more advanced than I was. You're already into the entrepreneur spirit, doing things in businesses and so forth. But I think one of the things that was interesting to me is that I always had this question, well, what do I want to do with my life? I was raised on a farm, and I hate to say this, but I didn't like farming. It's a tough business. I had to get up early in the morning and milk cows and irrigate at night and thin beets and pick tomatoes. And there wasn't a big learning curve with that type of situation. It didn't take you long to learn how to do it. And it really wasn't testing your intellect at all. And I thought, oh, that's something. So some of the things that I wanted to do something that I thought I could do well. Warren Buffett says we're all wired a little differently, and some people have different aptitudes and can do things. In other words, he says, I can't high jump 7 feet, but you know, he can certainly allocate money properly and do it better than probably anybody else has ever been able to do it in the world so far. And something that I would be adequately compensated for. I mean, I didn't want to make a lot of money, but I wanted to make enough money. I wanted a nice car that would start. We used to have when I grew up, we had an old Plymouth. It was a 1941 Plymouth. And that darn thing at times wouldn't turn over. I mean, it would run, and about half the time it would start, half the time it wouldn't start. And you just have to sit around and and say a few words, and pretty soon you go back and it would start. And that was tough to go on a date and not know whether your car is going to start when you get out there. So anyway, I thought, boy, a car that would run would be just wonderful. I was, like I say, raised on a farm, hard work, tough, a small town too. In our town of Syracuse, a town of less than 500, we only had one, if you're familiar with a ward. There's only one ward in that. Our stake was originally in Layton, Utah, and then we went to Clearfield, Utah, and then now I think they have 5 stakes in that little community. That's what inexpensive land does for you. But anyway, we had no lawyers, no physicians, no accountants, only farmers or government workers. They'd had a couple of government installations that had moved in. We had Hill Air Force Base, which was wonderful. We had the Naval Supply Depot. Can you imagine having a Naval Supply Depot in Utah? No one was going to bother us in the Great Salt Lake, of course. So, but anyway, they closed it sooner or later, decided that it wasn't exactly appropriate. We had the arsenal and so forth, and teachers. And so it was a process of elimination. I didn't want to be a farmer. Not that I didn't respect farmers, and we have to eat, and I shouldn't be saying that in an ag college, but that was not it. I had some skills in athletics. I wasn't great. I got into boxing because a football coach wanted me to box instead of boxing or wrestling, and there was a kid in my class that could beat me in wrestling, and so I said, well, I'll go into boxing, but I really have to learn how because I got a nose right on the front of my face, and I used to fight my cousins, and they'd always punch me in the nose. I could lick them all, but the nose got so sore. But anyway, so I kind of developed some pretty good skills and fought a number of times, but anyway, went down and fought in an AAU tournament down at the Salt Lake City, and knocked a Marine out the first fight, and then nobody else would fight me until the last guy. So, but I'd never been beat, except that I saw some of these guys who were still amateurs, and they had these cauliflower ears, and I kept thinking, if that's what they got on the outside, what's on the inside? That must be even worse. So it didn't take me long to figure out, I don't want to do that. So anyway, teaching looked like it was great. But I want to just say one thing. I want to compliment you on your education. Warren Buffett said, when asked, what's the one thing I can do to get onto my successful life that I'm going to have? He said, well, invest in yourselves. It's the most important thing you can do. Meaning, get your education. A lot of you will change positions. You probably might not stay in that particular field. You might change fields, but still get the education. That's actually the most important thing you can do. Be prepared. The opportunities will come in good times, in bad times. They're still going to come. And the possibilities are going to be greater if you're prepared and ready. You know, it is a challenging world and a changing world that we live in. It's just amazing. I have a hard time. You get a little older and you stop and reminisce a little bit. You think about the pioneers. You think about 60 years ago when I was a student. You think about kings. We lived better than kings did 400 years ago. Our lives are much better. And the poor pioneers that came across, without shampoo and toilet tissue and good toothbrushes and feet and shoes and, and suntan lotion. And I keep thinking that. Then my kids gave me this little iPhone. And you know all about this, but for me, this is kind of a miracle. Got a flashlight. It's got a video. Take video pictures. I can take still pictures. I can transfer them to somebody else. I can tell what my stock prices are every day. I can get all my emails on the thing. I can listen to music. I could go on and on. I mean, who would have believed this? My father passed away about 15 years ago, and this thing he would have thought was something else. I mean, it would have been just a mind-boggling to him to have something of this nature. So it's just a changing world. I can remember one time, had a fellow come down from Oregon and wanted to visit some furniture retailers. And I went down to Provo and visited one of the furniture companies there that was the biggest furniture company there. There's an old guy sitting there behind his desk, and he said, you know, times aren't the way they used to be. He said, look out this window. Used to be apple orchards. Used to be some cherry orchards over here. And now look, it's all houses. Look, it's all houses. He said, that's just terrible. I thought, he's in the furniture business. He's selling all those houses. What's he thinking about? So change, adapting to change is one of the things we're going to talk about a little bit. It's very, very important. And one of the reasons I think that we have been, if you might say, successful. Success can be very tentative. I mean, it isn't permanent. But we have been there. This is our 80th year, and I can remember that because I just had my 80th birthday too. So I remember that. It isn't hard for me to remember. But I think we're probably as good as anyone at adapting to change, because the world changes, people change, the styles, customs, their likes and dislikes change, and so you have to adapt. And I think most of the competitors, when I started, 1954, we had about 40 competitors that were probably as larger than we were, and I'm sure all of them were better financed because we were in the hole. We were in a negative position. But there's only 2 left, and they have not changed, and so they have not grown. One of them's a little appliance dealer in Ogden, Kiesel Sales and Service, and the other one is I think it's called Standard Furniture in Salt Lake City, and they haven't grown at all. It's just been a place to come. So part of our growth is adapting to change, and so change is really important. You need to do it. And another one is principle that I want to talk a little about, and that's living within your means. Thrift and frugality, very important. I had a fellow the other day that was chatting with me, and a good friend, and he's done well. He had a company, and he sold it, did very well with the company, and then he invested in a lot of real estate, and it's been tough for him, real tough, and needed some money. He was trying to figure out how he could get some money. I says, well, you've got a partner that, why don't you go to him and get him to, you shouldn't have to carry the whole burden. And I got thinking about it, and the guy lives in a 23,000 square foot home, drives an Audi 8, and he said, no, my partner doesn't have any money, he can't even pay his bills now. And I thought, that's too bad. You've got to learn to be frugal and live within your means. It's very crucial and very important. And that's the one thing that we preach in this particular book. And by the way, I'm going to skip around a little bit because my biggest goal today is to get you to read the book. And I had a fellow one time, he married one of our missionaries, and he was down at the Y, and I had to give a talk on R.C. Willey and business, and he asked me a lot of questions. In the meantime, I had given him a book. And I said to him, he asked me questions that I knew were in the book, and I said, John, read the book. So that was, I think, a Saturday, and next Sunday evening he called me and he says, hey, he said, I read the book. I did read the book. About a month later he said, hey, by the way, I got an A out of the class. They loved that article. So anyway, I want you to read the book. It's very important. Oh, by the way, there's a picture on the front here. Here's the good-looking guy, and then there's me, Warren, and myself. By the way, Warren wrote the foreword in the book, and he said that was one of the reasons he wanted me to write this book. He said, if you'll write the book, I'll write the foreword to it. So that's worth writing, or worth reading. But anyway, Warren, a wonderful guy. I mean, and we'll talk a little bit about him, and he's just a wonderful individual. One thing that he does is every year he invites people to bid for lunch. 4 people, along with them, 5 people to come to lunch with an individual that gets the bid. And it started out at about $2 million. And I think the last time it was $2,600,000. Now, after we had this picture taken, I took him to lunch. It cost me $28. So I always try to get a good deal, and that's what I'm going to tell you, is always get the best deal you can. You want to get as good a deal as you possibly can because, whatever, if you can buy cheap, it's easier to make a profit. And so $28 to go to lunch with Warren. Let me just tell you one little story quickly, and then I'll get into the R.C. Willey story. My recollections of Utah State University go back a number of years. I was a junior or a senior in high school, and I was in the ag club. I was one of those, they'd roped me into being one of those future farmers of America thing, and I'm not going to be a future farmer, but well, it was an easy A, and the guy liked me, and the instructor and so forth. We took a trip. We came up to Logan, and me and two of my buddies were running track at the time. And we were on the track team and running track, and they were having a track meet here at Utah State. And that's when the guy by the name of Van Noy, I think, or something, but people that I really respected, and I wanted to see that track meet so bad. And I finally got the idea. I said to the instructor, I said, why don't you let us out? Me and Charlie and Harvey will get out, and we'll go watch the track meet, but then we'll get down. We'll get home some way. And he said, oh, I couldn't do that. He says, no, I couldn't do that, Bill. And I said, what if we just get out the back door of this bus? He said, don't let me see you, but okay. So we jumped out the back of the bus, and we went up to this track meet. And we only had enough money for two of us to get in. And the gal that was there selling the tickets, she said, well, looking like nice boys, I'll tell you what, if one of you will go around to the back, there's a gate back there, and you can go in where a lot of the athletes come in, and you just come on in through there. I don't think anyone will give you any trouble. So anyway, I tell this, it gives me a little bit of the, maybe the naiveness of me, or maybe the risk taker that I am. I mean, here we are, penniless, three of us, and we need to get back to Syracuse, which is from Logan, is a long ways. You have to walk. And we didn't have a dime in our pockets. And in fact, they asked me, the two guys asked me, I said, oh, we'll just thumb back. We'll find a ride. And of course, at that time, we did a little bit of thumbing, and that's one of our mode of transportation. Well, we saw the track meet, had a wonderful time. And lo and behold, we catch a ride with a guy, and he said, I'm going to Kaysville. I said, oh, that's wonderful. That's close enough, because one of the guys lived in Kaysville. And we had to go to Syracuse, but I said, well, in the meantime, we can stop at the high school, and we'll go in and do our workout. We'll run our laps on the track, and we'll go down and get our track gear on and run the track. And so we did. We got down there, and we couldn't, school was closed. It was about 6 o'clock or so in the evening, or 5:30, and 6 o'clock, I guess. So we knew there was a window open always into the locker room, so we went through that window, went down, got our clothes on, went out, did our workout, came out. Harvey went to Kaysville, and Charlie and I thumbed, and we got into Syracuse. Got home just in time to finish my chores. So I just bring that up. You couldn't do that today, would you? I mean, nobody would say, well, how am I going to get down? No one will pick you up in the first place. I mean, the thumbings is not in style, in vogue. But I just figured some way we'll get home. And we wanted to see that track meet worse than we wanted to think about, well, maybe we couldn't get home, maybe we don't. What's going to happen if we don't get home? And if it gets dark, they're not going to pick us up as easy in the dark. They'll pick us up maybe in the light. Anyway, I'll just tell you a little bit about that. One of the questions you're probably going to want, why did Warren Buffett buy R.C. Willey? What did he see in us that he didn't have in other companies? What is his criteria for buying a company? And it's all listed in his annual report. It really does. But the first thing, he has to like management. The second thing is he has to understand the business. And the third thing, it has to have a good history. He doesn't want a company that's had a horrible past but a bright future, because usually the future is a lot like the past. It doesn't change an awful lot. And management has to agree to stay. He likes companies that have moats around them, meaning it's a tough barrier to entry. You can't get into that business real easy. And at the time, we had about 50% of the home furnishings business, a little over 50%, and about 35% of the electronic business in the state. So we were a pretty sizable merchant, and pretty much the dominant player in this field. Had good management, we thought. So anyway, let me just tell you a couple of things. Let me see if I want to stay on, because my time is going to really get much faster than what I can possibly. We talked about having, let me just tell you real quick. We talked about the debt. I'll talk about Warren a little bit later, and any questions you might want to ask, you can certainly do it. But let me tell you why I figure it's the American dream. I took the business over in 1954, and here we were, 600 square foot building, one employee, deeply in debt. My father-in-law turned the keys over to me June 1st, the day I graduated from school. And he was a wonderful guy. His cash register was in the back of his pocket. He was very generous. He had more overhead than he had income. And that's what we've always said. You need to live within your means. You've got to have the revenue has got to exceed the expenses. And if it doesn't, as a family or as a business or as a country, which we haven't been doing, pretty soon you're on the road to trouble. And he had a bookkeeper who was not a very good bookkeeper, a little dishonest to say the least. And so he really didn't know, in my opinion, exactly financially where he was. He was working on the float, which meant that he would buy $10,000 worth of appliances, get 120 days to pay for them, have them sold in 30. Then he'd buy another $9,000 worth of appliances and do the same thing. He got 90 days to pay for those and have them sold. So he had a lot of, but then when he got sick, and that's when he was sick, when he turned the business over to me, he gave me the keys. But here's what I had. I had a 600 square foot building. I had one employee. I had a red bank account. I had, we're doing about, the best year he had was $153,000 before. Now, I listed in the book $250,000, and that was the best year we had when I took it over in June and run it from June through the end of the year. But prior to that, that year before that was $153,000, which was a lot. These margins were very thin. You like to take trips. You never worked on percentages. It was strictly a matter of, if I can make $15 or $20, that's great, and so forth. I said that we had a lot of competitors in the market at that time. We had no bathroom facilities in that little 600 square foot building. Power was run from the house to the store, a 9-party telephone line. And, but there I was. I had one employee. I never run a TV ad. Of course, we didn't have TV. We just barely had started selling TVs, but we'd never run a TV ad or a newspaper ad or anything of that nature. Well, 40 years later, we sell the company to the second richest man in the world. So that is kind of the American dream. It's sort of a miracle, you might say, going from 153,000 in sales up to 259 million in sales, and having 1,300 employees later. Well, I stayed on for 7 years and grew the business to where we had 3,000 associates and 800 million in sales. So that is kind of the American dream, and that been a wonderful ride. And it wasn't instant success. It took 27 years to get to that first million in sales. My father-in-law run the business for 18 years, door to door. Then from 6 years later on, added the store. Actually, I can take maybe 5 minutes and just go through quickly and tell you just a little bit about R.C. Willey. But you're going to get all this out of the book. We hope you'll read that. R.C. Willey had probably an 8th grade education. He was in the same class as my mother, and she claims that she graduated from the 8th grade and Rufus didn't. His name was Rufus Call Willey, of course. But anyway, they were just electrifying Utah Power and Light, was electrifying the Davis County and Weaver County. In other words, they just had no electricity at that time. And they were just putting poles in and stringing wires, and he got a job doing that. And then he finally advanced up to where he was a station manager in the Farmington Canyon, where a lot of some of the power came from. And then he would go down to a distributor called Graybar Electric that distributed the Hot Point appliances. And so he finally decided that he'd get his wife one, and he did. He finagled and arranged to get his wife a refrigerator, and it was the hit of the town, hit of the city, to have a refrigerator and not be able to, to be able to keep things cold and not have to hang the meat on the side of the house, north side of the house, and hope that it was okay or not leftovers, or have cold milk with something else. So he thought, well, maybe I could sell a few of these, because a lot of the neighbors says, well, Ruth, can you get me one? Can you get me one? And so he decided that that's what he did, and he did it for a while. And then finally it got so busy that he quit his job and he did it full time. But he still was a one-man operation for 18 years. And about the time the Korean War was beginning, people couldn't get appliances during the Second World War. And so there was kind of a flood of people saying, well, hey, maybe we better upgrade our appliances, because if we don't, the Korean War might come along, or has come along, and it might be the same situation as the Second World War. So business picked up. And here he was out in the country with no overhead, selling cheaper than all the competitors. But the power companies wanted that because they had power in these houses, and they didn't want to just sell electricity for the lights. They wanted to sell electricity during the mornings and the daytime and so forth, and the refrigerator did that. And so refrigerators they were selling refrigerators and electric ranges and so forth where they could use more power. So anyway, his competitors started complaining that he wasn't a legitimate dealer. Here he was out, they never had a showroom, and working out of his garage, and a one-man operation, but he was selling so cheap that the competitors with overhead couldn't compete with him at all. And so they put pressure on the distributor, and the distributor said, okay, we don't want to lose the guy, but he's got to have a store, either uptown, around town, someplace. He's got to lease, build, or rent the store. Well, they decided they'd build one right next to their house. And this was the 600 square foot store, right in the corner of a corn patch. And it had all the features I told you. It had a place for 4 parking places in front, graveled, of course, and 9-party telephone line, no bathroom. 20 by 30 is a pretty small, but he was a legitimate dealer then. And he did it only to comply. He did this for about 6 years, and then he hired a person to help him deliver and repair. And so when he gave me the keys, 1954, the day I graduated, I'd helped him a little bit. That was the situation that I ran into. I started writing some checks because we had a lot of bills that needed to be paid. And I looked at some of the old bank statements, and they were all in the red, and I thought, well, they must have a deal with the bank there. Well, shortly after that, I got a very abrupt call from the soon-to-be president of the Barnes Banking Company, and he said, Bill, what are you doing? He says, you don't have any money in the account. You're writing all these checks. And I said, well, yes, I am. I have bills to pay. He said, but don't you know, if you don't have money, you don't write a check, you don't draw on an account you don't have any money on. And I said, well, I thought the bank, accumulated it and had a loan there, because in the past, they were all in the red. He said, well, that was between Mr. Willey and Mr. Gailey, who was the old president of the bank that R.C. had dealt with, but he was on a trip to Europe. He didn't go to Europe very quick in those days. It was by boat and so forth. So anyway, that was my introduction. Well, that was 1954. And then in addition to that, right after that, I get a call from the IRS. They said, we'd like to, I'm Mr. Vern Burton, and I represent the IRS. It's the Internal Revenue Service. I didn't exactly understand the acronyms. but I do definitely now, did then afterwards. He said, we need to come and audit your books. I said, I've never seen the books. I have no idea. So I called this accountant, and he said, oh, okay, I'll bring them up. I said, well, I'd like to meet with you. Well, he comes up one night and dumps him on my mother-in-law's front porch, and could never reach him again. And consequently, he had R.C. Willey, who was as honest as the day was long, had been paying this guy, and he was supposed to pay taxes. Never paid any income taxes, in addition to a few other things. So there we were. Here I am, 22-year-old kid, all these pressures. I thought, wow, what do we do? We had a good reputation of saving money, but anyway. So that's one of the things you want to look into the thing. Okay, 1957, right shortly after that, had a lot of clients with a lot of trouble with client services. I decided to maybe expand into the furniture. And that was a great idea, because that same customers, when we expanded, I had made a good connection with a local banker who trusted me and had enough money to build a little addition. So I added furniture. And our business doubled almost that next year, because we had the same customers selling them more product, and more product at a little more profit margin. It was a little more profitable. So that was there. And then, of course, 1969, I decided that, now this was 15 years later, by the way, from the time that we expanded into the furniture. And we expanded our Syracuse operation probably 8 or 9 times, just adding more as we could afford to do it. I decided that Hill Air Force was one of our biggest customers. The people that worked there was almost 20,000 civilian employees, and maybe 3,000 military. We sold 99% of all the military, and it was a wonderful source. But they kept saying, we're going to cut it back, we've got to cut it back, and so forth. And I kept thinking, well, we need to diversify. Half the business in the state of Utah is done in Salt Lake County area. 25%, that's what it used to be. It may have changed a little bit. 25% was done in the Davis, Weber, Box Elder County, and 25% in the Orem, Provo, in that particular area. And so I felt like we needed to expand into Salt Lake, and we did. 1969, built the store. Started on some TV advertising. Someone asked me a little bit about that. That's kind of an interesting, I'm going to let you read that, how I got a lot of free ads, not free ads, but almost free, for nothing, just by taking a look and getting out of the box a little bit. Also decided that we wanted to get into carrying our own accounts receivable. People buy home furnishings. At that time, they didn't have the cash to pay for it. And so you had to be able to finance it. And we had gone through an awful lot of financing processes and so forth. So finally decided to do it ourselves, because there was a law in the books called the installment basis of reporting income, meaning that you didn't have to pay your income tax if you built up a portfolio of a loan portfolio that you were financing these various accounts. And that worked out very well. It's in the book. It's kind of it was a great concept, because at the time that they closed the law, I had over $7 million that I owed to IRS that was not delinquent or not really due. They gave me 4 more years to pay for it, but I had that money free. I mean, it's Warren would have loved that, because he always talks about getting float free, and I was getting income tax free. I was paying no income tax there and using it to expand hardly. So that worked out well. Okay, the next 26 years we expanded. We built stores in West Valley, Orem, South Salt Lake, Riverdale, and then 1995 we were doing $259 million. We had hardly no debt and quite profitable. We were carrying our own accounts receivable. One of the reasons that Warren liked us was the fact that we were carrying our own accounts, and we had a great. The interest income banking is not a bad business at that particular time. So we were doing quite well, and we could maintain the margin of profit that he saw and wanted and was willing to accept. So he looked at us and said, hey, that's a great model. It's a great company, and I'd like to buy it. And we were certainly very willing to sell it to him. I talk a little about the story and how we met and how we went along with it. It's a great experience, really. It was a telephone conversation. Oops, time flies, doesn't it? It's awful. So I'm going to have to skip that one. But you want to read that in the book. It's quite interesting. And we had a wonderful relationship. We've had him in our own home, spent a lot of time with him. I was telling this group we were with, my business IQ went up 10 points by associating with Warren Buffett. Another 3 or 4 points associating with Doug. And with Mike, another 2 points. So business-wise. So anyway, let me do this. I know there's a lot of questions out there, and normally I usually take about an hour and a half. It's hard to tell 50 years and put it into 161 pages, too. That's very difficult to do, but it's a lot easier to do that than it is to put it in a 30-minute talk. Well, anyway, it was a wonderful experience to sell it to Warren. A man of integrity. I mean, his word is his bond.
Tell why you chose to sell it to Warren for less money than you were offered by other people.
Well, it fit. Number one, it was, like you say, it was a perfect fit. We were offered at the time, there was companies wanting to acquire businesses, especially businesses that were profitable. And we were very profitable for that. We had controlled our overhead very low, and we were buying right. We were the first guys that had gone overseas to buy product. We were buying at the same price some of our manufacturers were buying it at. We were running a very lean ship, and our margins were excellent. He was very pleased with our model, and it's a good model. And so we'd had about 5 offers for our company. And not that we were soliciting it, not that we really wanted to sell it, except that I think I was 62 or 3, and my brother I thought was going to run the business, and then church got a hold of him, and he spent the rest of his life, he just got released as temple president in Salt Lake City, but he spent almost 25 years. He spent 33 years in the business, but 25 years working in church assignments, which he loved, which was great. But anyway, so I wanted the company to go on beyond my tenure, and I wanted to stick around. I felt like, I got a lot of great ideas and so forth. And so I was willing to entertain sales, but I had actually 5 offers. 3 of them were from investment banking companies, and 2 of them were from other retailers. One of them was a company called Montgomery Ward. Another one was a company called Heilig Myers, and all of them, there was something about all of them. Number one, we wanted to stay closed on Sunday. We'd always been closed on Sunday, and we just didn't want the company to be open on Sunday. And I couldn't trust that any of those companies would have let us do that, number one. And all of them had flaws. Some of them were going to, they'd offered us $200 million, a little over $200 million. That's a lot of money from a kid that came out of Syracuse that made less than $1 an hour holding beets and fitting beets and so forth. So, I mean, it was huge money, but there was always a little caveat there that I didn't like. Some of them, most of the investment banking companies were going to say, okay, we'll pay you $100 million cash, and then we'll borrow another $100 million on the assets of the company. And so you'll get your $200 million. That was me and family and brothers. And I said, yeah, but the company would be encumbered for $100 million. Well, yeah, that's what I said. I've never had a mortgage on a building. And in the book, I tell you why. It was so tough to start with and I couldn't get one to begin with. I did have to sign everything personally, which I was certainly willing to do, because if I make a commitment, I wanted to honor it. Well, anyway, so I was talking to a friend of mine, and I said, you think Warren Buffett might have an interest in our company? I kind of turned down those 5 offers because we really didn't need to sell. But I was working 6 days a week, 10, 12 hours a day, and I kept thinking there's got to be something outside of this a little bit. I love it. I mean, I was enjoying it, and we were growing and moving forward, and things were going great. So anyway, I mentioned to this friend that I might, Warren might have an interest in it, because I knew a lot about Warren Buffett. I mean, he lets you continue to manage your company, and you continue to run it. It's like kind of having your cake and eating it too. And he said, well, I don't know why he wouldn't. So he said, I'll talk to him. I'm going to have lunch with him in about a week. And so in about a week, I get a phone call from a friend of mine, Irv Lumpkin, and he said, Bill, that Warren's wants to talk to you. He's very interested in your company. He says, you got a great company. So about 5 minutes later, I get a hang up the phone. He said he's going to call you. Hang up the phone. And it rings, and here's Warren Buffett. He said, Bill, I understand you have an interest in selling your company. I said, Warren, I'd kind of like to talk about it. Here's my dilemma. I said, have you got a few minutes? I got all the time in the world. And it was so easy to talk with him. I mean, he just, it was just great. I thought, boy, this guy. Well, I finally insisted on him. Oh, he said, send me a couple of yours financials, and I'll get back with you. So I got back with him. He sends me an email a few days later. Says, you've got a jewel of a company that fits our mold perfectly. I'll have you a price in 3 days. And so it did. I'll let you figure out what the price was. It's in the thing. By the way, he did up at $5 million. I've got this thing, and I've got to show you some pictures. Now, this is in the book. Wow. You can tell how organized I am. Maybe it's age, Doug. You think that's it? Okay, I want you to read this. These are in the book. But here's our first store. That's the way it looked. There's 3 pages across the front. That was it. Flat roof. It did leak a little, but other than that, it's a nice little building. We just built onto it and get a little better roof now. Here's R.C. Willey. Great guy. He was proud of that store. It was a real move up from him. Now, if it had been you for 18 years, you'd have had 10 other guys doing the same thing, because he'd put refrigerators into a customer's home and say, if you don't like it, I'll come and get it and take it back. Well, there was no way that wife was going to let that refrigerator go out. And so he had the contract there, and it was a farm plan. So it was just like shooting fish in a barrel, really. So opportunities were really terrific. And he did it for 18 years all by himself. And then had to build the store. He was forced to build the store. So in the book, there's a lot of what ifs that had to happen. What if we hadn't done this, which I think were good. This is our Murray store now. It's the first expansion outside. Now, it didn't look like that first go-around. This has been remodeled a little bit. But I remember standing on there with a guy from a capital investment company. He said, this store would go any place in America. We could do so well with this store. I said, yeah, but we have to be closed on. We'll talk about that later. I said, and so I dismissed him. There's our central distribution center. That's in South Salt Lake. That is it's 200,000 square feet, a little over 200,000 square feet. We have our corporate offices. Well, let's see. It's 280,000 square feet. We have 200,000 square feet of warehouse, and the rest is showroom and display and offices. Oh, there's Warren Buffett, of course. A guy by the name of there's Bill Child here, my brother Sheldon, and my son Dave, and oh my gosh, dear, Richard Turnbow. Yeah, Richard Turnbow, who's our chief financial officer. Great guy. When he came to work for me, I said, well, tell me a little about you, Richard. He says, well, I was born in Tabiona, Utah, finished 3rd in my class. And he said, I was student body president. I said, well, how many in your class? Well, there's 6. I said, well, tell me how you got student body president. That was an interesting story. He said, well, there was this guy that was going to run for president. He went out with he was dating a Turnbow girl, and he dated another girl, and so all the Turnbows wouldn't vote for him. They put me up and elected me. So I think it was a terrible choice. Murray Store, that was our first expansion. Did you want me to tell about that? Have I got time? That's what it was. There was a horse pasture, cow pasture, and when I spoke at it, I said, this is a lot better use to have this as a furniture store than what it was, just a run-down old horse pasture. But that's the Boise store. That's for the location of it. Yeah.
You got to tell that story.
Oh, should I quickly?
Yeah, you got to tell the story.
Okay.
Let me ask it this way.
Okay.
I'll ask the question this way. So Warren said to you that, Bill, as long as you can keep producing the numbers that you're doing, we won't have any problem maintaining the policy of no opening on Sunday. And he was willing to do that and give you his assurance
Yeah.
that you were never quite sure about the others. And this was important to you. And that you wanted to expand outside of the state of Utah. And in particular, you wanted to go to Las Vegas.
Yes, definitely.
So tell us how you ended up in Las Vegas. How was that possible? There is a happy ending to this story, but you're not
Okay.
going to believe this story.
Well, I went down to Las Vegas. I had to see if our model would work, and Las Vegas was growing. Henderson, Las Vegas was the fastest growing city in America for 10 years. And it was just, that desert was here 1 week, and next it'd be houses, and then desert, and then houses. It was just, the houses were encroaching on the desert like an army advancing. And so I went down and hired a helicopter. He was going to be there. So I went down, picked him up. We hired a helicopter and flew over it. And I said, look at this. I said, look at all these rooftops. Isn't this a perfect market? I said, there's one problem. We should have been here 5 years ago, but we weren't ready then, but we're ready now. Our infrastructure is ready. Our management team is ready. Our systems are ready. We need to be there. He said, okay, yeah. And when we got through, he said, no, we're not going. And I was just, I said, it's a closing Sunday, isn't it? He says, yep, we're not going to go into a market that we can't be successful at and be closed on Sunday. And we're not going to open on Sunday. But I don't think we can go to Vegas and be successful being closed on Sunday. This won't work. I said, well, I think it will, Warren, but, when Warren makes up his mind, you're all familiar with the internet type of the high techs when they started flying, and he didn't buy them, and everybody thought he was not. Then when the bubble burst, he became the hero again. He just doesn't. You can't. It's very hard to convince. He'll listen to you. But anyway, so then I talked about Boise, Idaho. I looked at Boise, Idaho. It's 285 miles from Salt Lake. We had the huge warehouse there that we had just built, and we could service it. Hopefully, I was going to service Las Vegas. And so I suggested it. We said, no, we're not going to go into Boise, Idaho. Finally, I come back with a little more information. And finally, one morning I was in the shower, and I got thinking about it. I said, I've got to do something out of the box completely. So I called him and I said, Warren, that morning I got to work. I said, I'd like to talk about Boise, Idaho. He said, first time he was ever gruff with me. We'd been such good friends. And he said, Bill, we've already talked about Boise, Idaho. And I said, Warren, I'm going to make you a deal you can't turn down. I said, number one, I will buy the land. Number two, I will build the building. And number three, if we're not successful in 6 months, we'll walk. We'll close the store. I'll guarantee the company doesn't lose a dime. He said, okay. He said, if we can't do $30 million, we'll close it. I said, okay. Well, the biggest store down there had only done about $21 million, or biggest store in Boise. I said, okay, that's fair enough. He said, and then if we can do that, I'll pay you 4% of sales. I'll lease it from you. And I said, well, I'm going to make you a better deal than that. If it's really successful, I'll sell it back to you exactly what I paid for it. He said, okay. So hung up. Now, you never know what's happening on the other line. He might have been looking at a $100 million deal or a $200 million deal. And here I'm talking about a little store in Boise, Idaho. So anyway, he called me back in about, 3 or 4 weeks. I went to a staff meeting and I said, we're going to Boise, Idaho. And the first thing I got to do is buy the land. And that's an interesting story. But so anyway, he called me back about 3 weeks. He said, Bill, I've been thinking about that. He said, I've never had anybody do that. Make me that kind of an offer. And he said, it's all downside for you. There's no upside at all, and it's all downside. And I said, no, it isn't. I said, if we're successful in Boise, you'll let me go to Las Vegas. He says, okay. So that's the way it started. And then we did $50 million the first year. And then he called it the Buffett store instead of the Boise store. So it was a wonderful experience. Let me just do it. Since then, he let me go to Las Vegas, Henderson, Summerlin, Reno, Sacramento. We're doing more business outside of the state. Let me just show you a couple other things. That's Warren. When he opened the store, this little boy sang the Star Spangled Banner. And he was the cutest kid you've ever seen. And Warren just fell in love with him. But Warren is one terrific guy. This is one of the displays. I'm going to get through these real quick. This is the grand opening there. That is Henderson. Uh-huh. Look at that. Isn't that nice? My favorite picture of all. Well, this was Las Vegas, of course. You know how the glamour and the glitz and so forth. On the grand opening, we had all these stars. We resurrected them. And Summerlin, this is in the book. $28 lunch with Warren. Book. I'm not going to go. I should have taken a little more. Oh, here's another deal. I'm not going to tell you. I mentioned this to a couple of people. Since then, I got into a few other things. We did the Utah Orthopedic Center. We built that. River Park Complex, which turned out well. I've had some successes. This is the orthopedic complex. We built that for the University of Utah, and they were thrilled to death with me because I gave most of it. Got them a deal they couldn't hardly turn down. The docs ended up buying it, and Ian Cummings worked with us and got them a deal. And so partners said, we're leaving so much money on the table, I can't afford to do this. I said, sure we can. I mean, it's for charity. Here's River Park. This is an office park I got involved in, and that's been a home run. We've done very well there. Timing was good. 22% vacancy in home office when I started, and it dropped down to 9, and so we did well with the 9. Anyway, okay, here's one that the jury is still out on. This my Hawaiian Kaloa landing. By the way, this picture, we have some tiki torches there now, so it's a better view. Anyway, this is the way it started. Here's our property. Let's see, this is next to it. It's right over here. That's our property there. And there's the trailers. So that was what it was. And I didn't want to get into this in the first place, but I finally ended up getting into it. And timing wasn't very good. There's our construction. You know, it's a volcanic island, and so you have to blast this stuff. It's, the soil doesn't go down too deep. But everything grows like crazy. About this point of time, I came back from a mission, and here was our problem. We owed $36 million to Chase Bank. We were spending $2 million a month. Partners had no money. Banks didn't want to loan us any money. Tough deal. What do you do? Well, the stock market had collapsed, down 1,000 points in 2 days. So anyway, we hung in there. I realized that I had to do something out of the box, which I did. And there it is now. And it's doing quite well as a hotel. It's a Wyndham Grand Resort. People love it. It's amazing. A year ago, plants were up like here. Now they're up to here. It's Kaloa Landing. If you want to look it up on the internet, it's a very nice. Our occupancy has been just out of sight. So anyway, maybe if we got time for this is some more of it. It's really the nicest thing on the island by quite a ways. So that's the American dream. A lot of luck and a lot of good timing, but you need to make good decisions. If you make good decisions and hang in there, things turn out well if your intentions are right. We're out on time, but do we have one or two questions, or do you think we better quit?
Let's take one or two questions before we have to go. I see one right over here, Bill.
Oh, good.
I was just wondering, how have you remained profitable in Las Vegas? It was growing so much, but now it's like one of the worst economies in the U.S.
You're absolutely right. That's a good question. I have to tell you, Las Vegas is one of our best markets right now. It dropped a little, but it did so well. That store, the first store, within 2 years was up to over $85 million. And that's way profitable. And then it dropped a little bit, but not much. But in the last 2 years, it's grown immensely. One reason I think a lot of our competitors have evaporated and gone away. And we're about the only game in town. There's one other one that's hanging on. But I think the fact that we were financially stable and financially financed adequately, and we're able to go out and drive the business. But you're right, it's been tough. Unemployment, 12, 13, 14%. I'm amazed. I don't understand it either quite, but we're doing quite well in Las Vegas. Sacramento has been terrific. It's been our #1 store. But there's a lot of people there. Another one?
Any other questions?
By the way, if you ever have anything to do with Warren Buffett, do it. You'd enjoy him. He's a great guy. He's a wonderful guy. He's honest. He's fun to be with. Like I say, it's just a treat. And I keep getting invited, even though I'm not running the store now, I keep getting invited back to the annual brunch. And he calls me every now and again. We have a good relationship. It was great.
Bill, I'm trying to find this spot in the book where Warren talks about to the shareholders.
Listen.
Right here. I'm going to read this.
Oh,
I got it.
you got it?
I'm going to read this.
You know, I have
So, why don't you?
Here's a copy right here.
I got it right here.
Have you got it?
Yeah.
I've got one right here if you want one. That's
Here's what it is. So, do you have it right there?
yeah, I do. I do somewheres. Oh my gosh. I had a bunch of endorsements I was going to bring, and I forgot. I put them down, and I couldn't remember. I remember what happened years ago. It happens to be on a piece of paper here. Yeah, he did give us some very nice compliments. What in the heck did I do? Oh, it's in. I may not have. It's probably in my car. Have you?
I got another shot. Yeah, bear with me. You're going to like this.
Oh.
I promise. Okay. Bill, I'll tell you where I've got it. I've got it in a speech that I'm going to give down at the Claremont Graduate
yes.
University.
Oh, well, wonderful. My gosh.
And I'm going to talk about you. And
oh, boy. My nose will be itching, won't it? Or my ears itching, what do they say?
This is why I know about it. Okay, here it is. It's right here. So this is what I say. This is in the speech I'm going to give down in Claremont, California. Two other prominent Utah Mormons who have shaped the Mormon brand are Bill Child and John M. Huntsman. I'm honored to call both of them friends and neighbors. Bill is the entrepreneur behind R.C. Willey, the highly successful furniture and electronic chain in Utah, Idaho, Nevada, and now California. You're going to have to tell me if you don't want me to say this, but I guess I'm saying this now because I want to make sure you're okay with it. Bill took over the company when it had sales of $250,000 in 1954 and sold it to Warren Buffett 41 years later when it had sales of $257 million. As Buffett later was to write, quote, he didn't do this by inventing something new. He just applied the oldest and soundest principle ever set forth. Treat the other fellow as you'd like to be treated yourself. By consistently following this principle, Bill transformed a hole-in-the-wall operation in the tiny town of Syracuse, Utah, into a business that enjoys the trust of millions of his fellow citizens. This is Warren Buffett speaking. The story of how Bill accomplished this remarkable feat is best told by Warren himself. And here's what he says. He wrote this speaking about the Boise and Las Vegas story. Buffett wrote this in his shareholders' letter of 2000 under the heading, quote, a managerial story you will never read elsewhere. And here's the quote from Warren Buffett. Here's a remarkable story from last year. It's about R.C. Willey, Utah's dominant home furnishing business, which Berkshire purchased from Bill Child and his family in 1995. Bill and most of his managers are Mormons, and for this reason, R.C. Willey's stores have never operated on Sundays. This is a difficult way to do business. Sunday is a favorite shopping day of many customers. Bill nonetheless stuck to his principles, and while doing so, built his business from $250,000 in annual sales when he took over to $342 million in 1999. Bill felt that R.C. Willey could operate successfully in markets outside of Utah, and in 1997 suggested that we open a store in Boise. I was highly skeptical about taking a no Sunday policy into a new territory where we would be up against the entrenched rivals open 7 days a week. Nevertheless, this was Bill's business to run. So despite my reservations, I told him to follow both his business judgment and his religious convictions. Bill then insisted on a truly extraordinary proposition. He would personally buy the land and build the store for about $9 million, as it turned out, and then he would sell it to us at cost if it proved to be successful. On the other hand, if sales fell short of his expectations, we could exit the business without paying Bill a cent. This outcome, of course, would leave him with a huge investment in an empty building. I told him that I appreciated his offer, but felt that if Berkshire was going to get the upside, it should also take the downside. Bill said nothing doing. If there was to be a failure because of his religious beliefs, he wanted to take the blow personally. The store opened last August and immediately became a huge success. Bill thereupon turned the property over to us, including some extra land that had appreciated significantly, and we wrote him a check for his cost. And get this, Bill refused to accept a dime of interest on the capital that he had had tied up for over the 2 years. If a manager has behaved, this is Warren Buffett speaking, if a manager has behaved similarly at some other public corporation, I haven't heard about it. You can understand why the opportunity to partner with people like Bill Child causes me to tap dance to work every morning, end quote. That's Bill Child.
Oh, Doug, I found it. There it is.